Alright, so this past week, I went on vacation, and as per usual, I'm going to talk about what I did there. Now, the first thing we did was we went to the Kennedy Space Center, and we saw the rocket garden, which is filled with a bunch of replica rockets that went to space. The actual rockets, of course, not the replicas. Like, for example, this here is the Saturn I. And then we have the F1 engine that was used on the Saturn V. And then we have a mural of the International Space Station, and beneath it, the flags of all the countries that have participated in building it. And then here we have a life-size replica of the Opportunity/Spirit, they're based on the same design, rover made entirely out of Lego, which is a lot of Legos. And then sticking with the Mars idea, here we have the Orion capsule, which is the new capsule they're working on to take astronauts to Mars. And speaking of which, here we have the Atlas V rocket that would actually launch the capsule to Mars, because you do need a rocket for that. And then heat shield-wise, here we have the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and Orion heat shields, just to give you an idea of how much bigger the Orion heat shield would need to be to survive the speeds of re-entry. And then on Mars, you'd want some sort of rover to drive around in, so here are models of various rovers astronauts could use. Speaking of rovers, here we have the Sojourner and the Opportunity/Spirit, again, based on the same design. Just kind of life-size replicas to get an idea of their sizing. For example, here we have the drilling arm that the rover used to better analyze rocks. And then this is the Curiosity, just to get an idea of how much of a big rover it is, just how much bigger it is than the others. Then, switching to space planes, here we have the Dream Chaser, which is the idea for a new space plane to bring astronauts to space aboard the space shuttle. Which will replace a previous space plane, which we can see the boosters and fuel tank of here, models of that is. The previous space plane being, of course, the Space Shuttle. And this is the Space Shuttle Atlantis, which is an actual space shuttle that actually went to space. You can see in the back of the Canadarm there. But yeah, there we had the cockpit, the payload bay. This is what we're seeing right now. And then coming up, we have the engines. So these are the engines for the space shuttle, which actually went to space. And then a close-up of the engines. Here we can kind of see the lift-off engines, not the orbit engines. Those are a bit different, a bit smaller. But yeah, these are the lift-off engines. You can kind of see inside the bell there. Yeah, and here we have inside the cockpit. We've got the controls kind of there for the Canadarm. And then if we're going to pan around quickly, we're going to see the piloting area to actually control where it's going. And this is a toolbox they would use, kind of a soft toolbox. So that's interesting. And then the wheels that they would use for landing, because it would need to do that eventually. And then, of course, the point of the space shuttle was to bring up payload. And here we see the Hubble telescope, which is one of the payloads it brought up. And then a future payload, which is not yet developed, would be the James Webb Space Telescope, which was brought up later. And then, of course, the biggest payload of all, the International Space Station, where you could see the toilet and then the bedroom of. So yeah. And of course, you'd also bring up people. So here we see the flight suit for taking off, and then the EVA suit for actually going outside. And then on the ground, they would be transported around in this van thing. And then the space shuttle would be transported on this plane. It would be attached to the plane using a mechanism like this. So it could be flown back to Florida and be relaunched. And then here we see all the space shuttles, the Endeavour, Atlantis, Discovery, Challenger, Columbia, and Enterprise going backwards from creation. And while at the Kennedy Space Center, we did go on a bus tour around the Space Center just to see the various kind of command and control buildings around there to kind of facilitate the entire compound, kind of help keep it organized. And this here is one of the unmanned launch pads, meaning they launch unmanned rockets. The pad itself was, of course, has people there to kind of make sure it works. And they actually have 3 unmanned launch pads, and here's a second one of them. You can see kind of out there in the distance. And this is where they would store space shuttles, back when they used them. So they would kind of store them there when they're not being specifically launched. And this is the control center for kind of facilitating the entire launches. And here's the vehicle assembly building where they would assemble any of the rockets, the Saturn V or the space shuttles. And you can see the inside of it a bit. And then to give you an bit of an idea of scale, here is a piece of the flag, like scale flag of what is actually on the building. It's a very big building. This here is then kind of the launch pad where the rocket or shuttle would be assembled on, and then it would be carried around on this very huge and slow vehicle to the launch pad, because they have to be far away, because if they're too close, the launch would destroy the vehicle assembly building, which you do not want. And then, speaking of launch pad, here we have one of the manned launch pads for launching manned rockets. So there we've got launch pad A, and there we've got launch pad B. You can kind of see the exhaust port and the lightning rod that would collect lightning to make sure it did not hit the rocket or shuttle. And then here's one of the kind of the loading arms that astronauts would walk on to get to the rocket. And here's a tracking station for tracking the rocket once it launched. And here are all the mission patches from every manned mission. The Apollo program and the shuttle program, just all the mission patches. Then, speaking of the Apollo program, here we have an actual capsule that went to space and one of the flight plans that they used during one of the 6 Apollo missions that went to the moon. There were, of course, 17 in total, but only 6 landed on the moon. And then here we see kind of the evolution of spacesuits getting increasingly more advanced until we get to the one used on the Apollo missions here. I'm not entirely sure how it differs from the ones used during the for the International Space Station, but I imagine there are differences. And here we see a close-up of kind of the helmet they would use, and then these are actual moon rocks from the moon. And here you can see kind of where this one was collected. Yeah, and then, very cool, you can actually touch a moon rock, so I just wanted to show you that's me touching an actual moon rock. And then here we see the Saturn V, kind of what the rocket would look like. There we've got the kind of the crew capsule, and then there we've got all the stages, just all the way going down. And here we've got the service module, where they would spend most of the time in the trip to the moon. Here we have the lunar module, which is what they would use to land on the moon. And then here we have the lunar rover, which is what they would use to drive around on the moon. Now, in my Space Camp video I made about 6 years ago, I did show something very similar to this. However, I wanted to show you guys this again because it is very cool. And this is a cutaway of the Saturn V rocket, allowing to show each of the stages, the fuel tanks, the oxidizer tanks, as well as the lunar module, the service module, and the capsule. I just wanted to show you that again because it's very cool. Then, the second part of our trip, we did go on a cruise. Now, while still very fun, it's not nearly as interesting as space, so I'm not going to spend as much time on it. Despite the fact that we spent more time on the cruise. What you can in fact see the vehicle assembly building from the ship, just to give you an idea of just how big that building is. Nevertheless, we departed from Florida and headed to Nassau, not NASA, Bahama. And there we have a better view of what a ship looked like. Kind of a nice big ship. They're ridiculously big. It's kind of the point of them. But then at Nassau, we saw this very cool military ship. And then we went on a Segway tour. Yeah, I know, it's very dorky, but hey, it was actually pretty fun just driving around there. By the way, that in front is my sister, Jessica. She was embarrassed about it, so I of course have to mention her name. We went to the beach, and we saw this lighthouse on the tour, as well as this very large cruise ship just sailing past, gonna dock. The second stop, we stopped at Freeport, Bahama, where at the beach I made this sand wall to protect me from the water. And it actually worked pretty well. Kept me dry. And then interestingly, they have a bunch of these oil tanks at Nassau to store oil for the US, which I thought was kind of interesting. On the cruise ship itself, there was this very cool lobby with these nice fancy glass elevators and this glass ceiling. And then we played a bunch of kind of very large-scale chess. We'd actually have to pick up and move the pieces. We ate at this dining center, specifically that table. And then this is the room I stayed in. It was the bathroom. And then here we've got kind of the bedroom. It's spinning around. TV. There is my bed. You can see my camera bag on it. Then the third part of our vacation, we went to Universal Studios. which were also very cool. Not going to spend a huge amount of time on, though. Though we did go to see Harry Potter World, and then we got the night bus, and then Diagon Alley with Gringotts Bank up there. It's very well done. It's just cool kind of to walk through there. For example, here we've got the walkway to Dock 9 3/4, where it actually looks like you're going through a wall. And then, of course, here we've got the Hogwarts Express, which you would get on to go to the second part of Harry Potter World, which here we've got Hogsmeade, which is, again, it's just very cool just to walk around and look at it. There are rides, but it's cool to just see it. They had, for example, this candy shop where you could get a bunch of candy from the books/movies, and then they also had 3 swords where you could actually kind of eat, like get butterbeer, for example. And of course, they had Hogwarts, because it is, Harry Potter World. And there was actually a garden there, but I didn't show you the inside of it, because I don't think I could. And then we've got Jurassic Park, a replica of that, and we've got kind of the visitor center here. It was very cool just to kind of see. And then we've got kind of the laboratory, where you can kind of see the raptor eggs, and one of them would hatch, but I didn't get a good view of that. And we have a species tracking unit, and I thought very amusingly, there is a lizard on there. Just kind of wanted to show you that. Then we have the vehicles from there. We've got kind of the RC ride vehicle, as well as the gas-powered Jeep, with right above it a T-Rex. And then here we have the Jeep from the second movie, as well as then the Spinosaurus from the third. And then there was what I'm assuming is a fake raptor encounter. I'm pretty sure it wasn't actually real. And then we also stopped to eat at Cowfish, which I mentioned because of those of you familiar with me and the whale cow, I thought was kind of amusing. But nevertheless, after that, we got on our plane and went home. And that was our vacation. Hope you enjoyed it, and see ya.